Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How are you today? Come on in. Donna's Sewing Circle is open for business. Come on in. There's plenty of seats. Join the circle. How are y'all doing today? I hope y'all are finding a cool spot. It's not too bad here in my studio today. It's a bit humid outside. We had storms last night, so it helped a little bit. It's not steamy yet. Still early though, so we'll see. Today's lesson is lesson number 7, and it is a lot of sewing terms and definitions. There's a whole lot in my book. I will only go through a few of them today. So to get more in-depth details, you can order my book. It's on Kindle, or you can get the paperback. It's called Donna's Sewing Circle, and it's got a 1950s look on the front of it. It's real pretty. Anyway, enough of that. We'll just get right into the lesson today. So when you're sewing and you're reading a sewing magazine, and it says 1/4 inch seam, and you're like, leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance. What are they talking about? The 1/4 inch seam allowance is something you add, like if they tell you to make an 8x8 block, seam allowance is included. That means that the block will actually be smaller than 8x8 when you're finished. The seam allowance is where your seam goes, and that extra spot on the outside of your seam is called the seam allowance. And most patterns call for 1/4 inch. That'll give you lots of space on the outside of your seam, so your fabric will stay together. You usually don't want anything smaller than a 1/4 inch because it can pull the laundry. There's 1,000 things that can happen to a seam allowance that isn't large enough. So a lot of magazines, a lot of patterns will say 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's what they're talking about. I usually follow the edge of my foot. Most machines, that is basically a 1/4 inch. In one of the other videos, I actually sewed where the quarter seam allowance says on my machine, and then followed the edge of my foot, and the stitches are almost on top of each other. So I know that following the edge of my foot is basically a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's close enough for me. So check your machine. You can measure it with a little tape measure, or there's a little seam gauge that you can buy. But let me see if I can find something. The backing, if you're making a quilt and it says you need 3 yards of backing, what's that talking about? That's the back of your quilt. Usually I am a thrifter, so I do not like to buy brand new fabric when I'm making, especially a quilt. When I'm making something, I usually use a thrifted item. And the backings for my quilt, if they're small enough, it'll be flannel or fleece. You can buy fleece. I usually will buy fleece because it's large enough, as in you don't have to sew 2 pieces together. If it's bigger than a throw quilt, fleece won't be wide enough. You'll have to sew 2 pieces together, and I do not like to have the seam on the back of my quilt. So if the quilt is too big, I refer back to a sheet. If you're going to make a queen size quilt, I get a king size sheet. That way you have the excess you need and you won't be short. If I'm making a twin, I'll buy a queen sheet. And a lot of times I won't buy them. I'll go to the Goodwill store, thrift store, yard sales, and I'll look for a really nice patterned fabric for the back of my quilt. Now I will say, do not buy the mixed fabrics when you're making a quilt backing. It doesn't work real well. So that's what backing is. And batting is what's inside your quilt. If you see the word batting, it's talking about the stuff on the inside of your quilt. It's usually fluffy like cotton, cotton ball, but it comes in a roll. And me cutting corners, I have found that if you go, I'll say Walmart because that's usually where I buy them, they have what they call polyester blankets, and they're basically the same everything as the quilting batting that you buy, only it's a whole lot cheaper. So when you need batting, especially for a twin, queen, king, full-size quilt, go to Walmart and get the polyester blanket. I can have one in here to just show you. Yes, I do. Bigger ones. This one is a 90 by 90, so it's a full queen size. So this would work in a queen size quilt. So look for those. You can find those at Walmart. That's what I use, and that's what I use for batting. Now I do sometimes for the smaller quilts or something use the regular batting that you can get at Hobby Lobby. Sometimes you can buy them at Walmart. If I'm making a throw quilt, I usually won't even put batting in it if I'm using a fleece backing, because that's heavy duty enough. You don't want anything really heavy. You just want something to snuggle up with. So that's what batting is. Let's see what else. Let's see. There's so many words, but they're not so strange to me now because I've been doing it for so long. Another quilting term is if you sew in the ditch. Sew in the ditch is the last step you'll do before you sew the binding together. And when you sew in the ditch, it's sewing all three pieces of your quilt together: your top, your batting, and your backing. And what you do for sewing in the ditch is you sew right along that seam line that you did to join your blocks together. It will design a tic-tac-toe like pattern on the back of your quilt. So that's sewing in the ditch. I teach that in class. There's also free motion quilting, which requires a different foot than I have on my sewing machine. And you basically are quilting on your homemade machine. Some machines it's easy to do with, and some machines it's hard. If you have, I'm trying to think of, I think you can still do it on the beginner brother. It may be a little more difficult, but it's still easy to do. So, but if there's so many questions and so much I can say. So the best way to get my dictionary is to go ahead and purchase either the Kindle book or the workbook, the physical copy. And the links are provided below. And I hope I was able to help you with some of the definitions I gave you today. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. And let me know what state you're listening from. Like I've said in previous lessons, most of my students are from Indiana and Kentucky, so I would really love to see how far reaching my videos are going. And if there's anything you want me to teach on, any questions you have that I didn't answer, feel free to leave a comment. I would love to hear from you. And I will see you next time. God bless.